Billionaire humiliates elderly driver at party. During will reading, everyone is shocked to discover their families share a secret. The elegant ballroom of the prestigious Manhattan hotel sparkled under the dimmed chandelier lights, casting a warm glow over the gathering. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfumes and the soft clinking of champagne flutes filled with bubbly drinks. Guests, adorned in their finest formal attire, mingled and laughed, celebrating the retirement of a man who had dedicated decades of his life to the Thorne family. As the crowd settled down, the spotlight shifted to the polished wooden stage where William Thorne, a billionaire known for both his success and his arrogance, prepared to deliver his speech. Dressed in a tailored suit that exuded authority, William approached the microphone with a confident stride. His presence commanded attention, and the room quieted in anticipation. He cleared his throat, flashing a disarming grin that momentarily masked the condescending glint in his eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth and self-assured. "Tonight, we are here to celebrate an extraordinary man, Arthur Blackwood. A man who has spent 30 years as my driver, navigating the chaotic streets of this city with the precision of a seasoned sailor." The audience responded with polite applause, but William continued, his tone shifting as he leaned into the microphone, casting an almost mocking glance towards Arthur, who stood off to the side. Arthur, a man in his 70s with silver hair and a gentle demeanor, wore a modest suit that had seen better days. He forced a smile, the corners of his mouth trembling as he braced himself for the impending humiliation. "Now, I must say, Arthur, you've always been a steadfast companion, albeit one who has never quite grasped the concept of luxury. I mean, who else could turn a simple drive into an exercise in frugality?" William chuckled, and a ripple of laughter followed from the crowd. "I often wondered if you were secretly saving for a retirement in the suburbs, or perhaps just trying to teach me the value of a dollar." The laughter grew louder, and William reveled in the attention, unaware or perhaps uncaring of the impact his words had on the elderly man. Arthur's face fell, his smile fading as the laughter echoed around him, each chuckle a sharp reminder of his place in the Thorne hierarchy. He felt the sting of humiliation burn in his chest, a wave of memories flooding back, years of loyalty, dedication, and care for the Thorne children, now overshadowed by this moment of mockery. As William continued his speech, Arthur turned away from the spotlight, retreating to a quiet corner of the ballroom. He leaned against the wall, his heart heavy as he gazed out over the crowd. The vibrant conversations and laughter felt like a distant hum, overshadowed by the swirling emotions within him. He remembered the countless hours he spent not just driving William, but raising his children, teaching them about life, kindness, and the importance of humility. In his mind, a flashback surfaced, a sunny day in Central Park, where young William and his siblings played under the watchful eye of Arthur. He could see himself sitting on a bench, the children's laughter ringing in his ears as they chased each other, their faces alight with joy. He had been more than a driver, he had been a caretaker, a mentor, and, in many ways, a surrogate father. But tonight, none of that seemed to matter. "Look at them," he muttered to himself, watching the guests engage with one another, their faces bright with joy, oblivious to his pain. "They don't know what it's like to sacrifice, to dedicate your life to someone else's family and receive nothing but scorn in return." He took a deep breath, steadying himself as he tried to push the memories away. Yet, they lingered, haunting him. Another memory flickered through his mind, his own father, a hardworking man who had instilled in him the values of dignity and perseverance. "You must never let others define your worth, Arthur," his father used to say. "Your character is your true wealth." The sound of applause pulled him from his thoughts, and he turned to see William wrapping up his speech. With a final flourish, the billionaire raised his glass, a smug smile plastered on his face. "To Arthur, who has served us well. May your retirement be filled with all the things you never had the chance to enjoy." The crowd erupted into cheers, but Arthur felt as though he had been punched in the gut. He watched as William basked in the adoration of the guests, his heart heavy with a mix of anger and disappointment. In that moment, Arthur decided he could not remain a silent witness to his own humiliation. Later that evening, as the festivities began to wind down, Arthur stepped out of the ballroom into the cool night air. He needed to escape, if only for a moment. The city was alive, the sounds of laughter and music drifting out into the streets, but all he felt was the weight of the evening pressing down on him. His phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking the silence of his thoughts. It was a message from an attorney he had not heard from in years. Curiosity piqued, he opened the message. "Arthur, I have important news regarding your father's estate. Please come to my office tomorrow." The words swirled in his mind like a whirlwind. His father had passed away many years ago, leaving behind a modest inheritance that had barely covered his funeral expenses. What could this attorney possibly want? He tucked the phone back into his pocket, the prospect of the meeting both daunting and intriguing. The next day, Arthur found himself sitting in the small, cramped office of the attorney. The walls were lined with shelves of dusty books, and the air smelled of stale coffee. The attorney, a balding man with round glasses, sat across from him, shuffling through a stack of papers. "Thank you for coming, Arthur," the attorney began, his voice serious. "I have some rather unexpected news about your father's will." "Unexpected?" Arthur repeated, his heart racing. "What do you mean?" The attorney adjusted his glasses, looking up at Arthur with a mix of sympathy and urgency. "Your father, it seems, left behind a trust. And there are conditions attached to it." Arthur leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Conditions? What kind of conditions?" The attorney's expression grew grave. "The trust is substantial, but it can only be used for a specific purpose. You see, your father wanted to ensure that the wealth was used to exact revenge on those who have wronged you." Arthur's heart sank. Vengeance was not something he had ever considered. Revenge? That's absurd. My father wouldn't have wanted that. "I understand how you feel, but those are the terms," the attorney replied. "You have the option to reject it, of course, but if you accept, you will have to consider how you want to navigate this situation." Arthur sat back in his chair, grappling with the weight of the revelation. The thought of using the money to retaliate against William felt wrong, a betrayal of everything his father had taught him. Yet, the allure of power and the chance to finally make a statement against the man who had humiliated him was intoxicating. As he left the attorney's office, Arthur wandered the streets of Manhattan, the city bustling with life around him. He felt a storm of emotions brewing inside: anger, frustration, and an overwhelming sense of confusion. He had spent a lifetime serving the Thorne family, only to be belittled and dismissed in front of their peers. And now, here was an opportunity to turn the tables. The question was, would he take it? Amid the chaos of his thoughts, one image remained clear: the laughter of the Thorne children in the park, their innocence and joy reminding him of what truly mattered. Arthur had always believed in the power of kindness, and in that moment, he began to question whether revenge would bring him peace or merely deepen the divide between him and the man who represented everything he had tried to rise above. In the heart of the city, Arthur Blackwood faced a crossroads, each path leading to a different future. And as he took a deep breath, he knew that whatever choice he made, it would be a defining moment in his life. Arthur Blackwood stood in the dimly lit corner of the bustling office of the law firm, his heart racing as he processed the words of the attorney before him. The room was cluttered with piles of documents, the scent of paper and ink heavy in the air. Sunlight streamed through the large window, casting long shadows across the floor, but Arthur barely noticed the beauty of the day outside. His focus was entirely on the man sitting across from him, who was now explaining the contents of a letter that would change everything. "Mr. Blackwood," the attorney said, adjusting his glasses as he glanced down at the parchment in front of him. "I understand this news may come as quite a surprise, but your father's will has specific conditions that you must understand." Arthur swallowed hard, his throat dry. He had spent years driving the Thorne family, often reflecting on the sacrifices he made to provide for his own. The thought of a legacy from his father was both thrilling and daunting. What does it entail?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The attorney leaned forward, his expression serious. Your father left you a substantial sum of money, but there is a caveat. The legacy you inherit can only be utilized for one purpose: revenge against those who have wronged you. Arthur's mind reeled. Revenge? It seemed so foreign to him, so contradictory to the values his father had instilled in him. Revenge, he echoed, incredulity lacing his words. Why would my father want me to use his legacy like that? It doesn't make sense. The attorney sighed, flipping through the pages of the will. Your father believed that you had been wronged, particularly by the Thorne family. He felt that your years of loyal service were not properly appreciated, and he wanted to ensure that you had the means to stand up for yourself. Arthur clenched his fists, the emotions swirling within him. The humiliation he had felt at the retirement party flooded back, along with the memories of the countless times he had been treated as just another piece of furniture, always there to serve but never to be seen. But revenge isn't the answer, he said, shaking his head firmly. That's not who I am. I understand, the attorney replied, his tone softening. But the will is clear. You have a choice to make, and it's a heavy one. This inheritance could change your life, but it comes with a burden. As the attorney continued to explain the details of the will, Arthur's thoughts drifted to his father. He remembered the way he had taught him to value hard work and integrity, to stand tall even in the face of adversity. His father had been a man of principle, and Arthur had always admired that. What would my father think of this? He wondered aloud. The attorney's gaze softened as he observed Arthur's internal battle. With all due respect, Mr. Blackwood, you might need to consider your father's perspective. He believed that sometimes, standing up for oneself requires taking a stand against injustice. He wanted you to have that power. Arthur leaned back in his chair, feeling a wave of confusion wash over him. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to sort through the tangled emotions. On one hand, he felt the sting of betrayal from William Thorne and the arrogance that had overshadowed years of loyalty. On the other, he cherished the values his father had imparted to him. I don't know, he admitted, looking up at the attorney. I need time to think. Of course, the attorney said, nodding. This is a significant decision. Take as much time as you need. Just remember, the clock is ticking. The will must be executed within a certain time frame. As Arthur left the office, the weight of his father's legacy pressed heavily on his shoulders. He stepped out into the bustling streets of Manhattan, the sounds of the city swirling around him. People rushed by, engrossed in their own lives, oblivious to the turmoil he was feeling inside. He wandered aimlessly, his thoughts consumed by the will. What would he do with this money? The thought of revenge was intoxicating, a fantasy that whispered sweetly in his ear. But the more he mulled it over, the more he felt a sense of dread. He had seen firsthand the emptiness that wealth could bring, especially in William Thorne's life. Arthur, a voice interrupted his reverie. He turned to see Maria, the cheerful receptionist from the law firm, approaching him with a warm smile. You look deep in thought. Everything okay? Arthur managed a small smile in return. Just some family matters to sort out, he replied, not wanting to divulge the complexities of the will. She studied him closely, her brow furrowing with concern. You know you can talk to me if you need to. I've always admired your integrity, Arthur. Whatever it is, I'm sure you'll make the right choice. He appreciated her kindness, but the enormity of the decision weighed heavily on him. It's complicated, Maria. My father left me something, and it comes with conditions that I never expected. Maria's eyes widened slightly. Conditions? Like what? Arthur hesitated, unsure whether to share the details. It's about revenge, he finally said, the word feeling foreign on his tongue. I never thought I'd be in a position to even consider that. Revenge, she echoed, her expression shifting from concern to curiosity. Do you really think that's what your father wanted for you? I don't know, he admitted, running a hand through his hair. He felt I was wronged by the Thorne family, and he wanted me to have the means to stand up for myself. But I've always believed in rising above. Revenge isn't who I am. She nodded thoughtfully. It sounds like you need to figure out what you truly want. Just because you have the means doesn't mean you have to follow through with what's expected. It's your life, after all. Arthur felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. You're right, Maria. I need to take my time and think about what I want to do. Maybe I can use this to help others instead of seeking revenge. Exactly. Maria exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. You've always been a good person, Arthur. Use your father's legacy to make a positive impact, not to dwell in negativity. Arthur's heart swelled with gratitude. She saw him, truly saw him, beyond the title of driver he had worn for so long. Thank you, Maria. I really needed to hear that. As they parted ways, Arthur felt a renewed sense of purpose. He didn't have to rush into a decision. Instead, he could take the time he needed to honor his father's legacy in a way that aligned with his values. Walking through the streets, he began to imagine the possibilities. He could help those in need, support his community, and perhaps even pave a new path for himself, one that didn't involve revenge or bitterness. The thought brought a smile to his face, and for the first time since the party, he felt a glimmer of hope. Yet, deep within, the struggle remained. The temptation of revenge still lingered, whispering to him in moments of solitude. Would he truly be able to resist the allure of payback? Or would the shadows of humiliation and betrayal push him to a breaking point? As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden hue over the city, Arthur knew he had a long journey ahead. One that would require him to reconcile his past with the future he envisioned. But he was determined to navigate it with integrity, honoring his father's memory in a way that reflected the man he aspired to. Be strong, compassionate, and above all, true to himself. Arthur Blackwood sat in the small, dimly lit office of his modest apartment, the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. The room, a mix of faded wallpaper and well-used furniture, was a stark contrast to the opulence of the Manhattan gala he had just attended. He leaned back in his chair, staring blankly at the wall, his mind swirling with a cacophony of thoughts and emotions. The harsh laughter of William Thorne still echoed in his ears, a cruel reminder of the humiliation he had endured at the hands of the man he had devoted his life to serving. The night's events replayed in his mind like a haunting film reel. He could see William standing at the podium, his confident demeanor radiating arrogance as he belittled Arthur in front of a room full of glittering guests. William had laughed, mocking Arthur's humble life, a life spent dedicated to the Thorne family. It was a moment that seemed to strip away the years of loyalty and hard work, reducing Arthur to nothing more than a punchline. The sting of that public humiliation was still fresh, cutting deeper than any physical wound. As he sat in silence, a flood of memories washed over him, memories of laughter, of playful childhood antics, of caring for William's children as if they were his own. He remembered the countless hours spent driving them to school, attending their performances, and being a steady presence in their lives. Arthur had loved those children, and in many ways, they had filled the void left by his own family. His thoughts turned to his father. "What would you say, Dad?" he whispered to the empty room, imagining the comforting presence of the man who had shaped his values. His father had always taught him about dignity, hard work, and the importance of standing tall, even in the face of adversity. He could almost hear his father's voice, a gentle yet firm guiding hand, urging him to rise above the petty insults and to remember the man he was. Just then, a soft knock on the door interrupted his reverie. It was Maria, the cheerful receptionist from the Thorne building. Arthur had often found solace in her warmth and kindness amidst the cold corporate environment. She peeked her head in, her bright smile cutting through the gloom that enveloped him. "Arthur? Are you okay? I heard about the party. I just wanted to check on you," she said, stepping into the room with a concerned look. I'll be fine, Maria, Arthur replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Just thinking. Maria took a seat across from him, her expression softening. You know, I've seen how dedicated you've been to the Thorne family. You've always been more than just a driver. You've been a part of their lives, and they should have recognized that. Arthur sighed, glancing out the window at the city that never seemed to sleep. It's hard to see it that way when you're humiliated in front of everyone you've ever known. He made me feel small, like all those years meant nothing. William doesn't know what he has, Maria said, her voice steady. He's so caught up in his own world that he can't see the value in people like you. But you do have value, Arthur. You've made a difference in so many lives, including his children's. Arthur appreciated her words, but doubt lingered in his heart. I just received a message about my father's will. It's complicated. There's a legacy involved, but it comes with a condition: vengeance against those who've wronged me. Maria raised her eyebrows, her eyes widening in concern. Vengeance? Arthur, you're better than that. You know that revenge won't fill the void you're feeling right now. You've got to think about what you truly want. What do I want? Arthur echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. I've dedicated my life to this family. I've poured my heart into my work. And yet, in a single moment, it all turned to ash. Maybe it's time to think about what you want for yourself, Maria suggested gently. You're retiring now. This is your chance to explore what truly makes you happy. Don't let William's words dictate your worth. Arthur nodded slowly, contemplating her advice. You're right. But the money. It could change everything. I could finally do something for myself. Or you could do something for others, she countered. Use that money to lift others up, just like you've always done. Think about what your father would have wanted. He taught you about dignity and compassion, didn't he? A flicker of realization dawned on Arthur. He did. He always believed in helping those in need. Maybe that's what I should do. But I need time to figure it out. Take your time, Maria encouraged, her smile returning. You don't have to rush into anything. Just remember, you have the power to choose how you want to live the next chapter of your life. As Maria spoke, Arthur felt a glimmer of hope rising within him. Perhaps there was a way to channel his feelings into something constructive, to honor his father's legacy without succumbing to the urge for revenge. He had always believed in the power of kindness, even when faced with the harshness of the world. I think I'd like to help James, the gardener, Arthur said, his voice gaining strength. He's struggling to make ends meet. If I could help him start a small business, maybe that would bring some joy back into my life. Maria's eyes sparkled with approval. That's a wonderful idea, Arthur. Helping someone else could make a world of difference for both of you. You see, you're already on the right path. Arthur smiled, feeling a sense of clarity wash over him. Thank you, Maria. Your support means a lot. I've been so lost lately, but maybe this is my chance to find my way again. As Maria left the room, Arthur felt a renewed sense of purpose ignite within him. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, allowing the warmth of her words to settle in his heart. He could use this new chapter to build something meaningful not just for himself, but for those around him. With a burgeoning sense of determination, Arthur began to envision the possibilities that lay ahead. He wouldn't let William's actions define him. Instead, he would rise above it all, honoring his father's teachings and embracing the inherent goodness within him. In the days that followed, Arthur made plans to meet with James. He reached out to the gardener, who had always been a steady presence in the Thorne estate, sharing stories and laughter over the years. Arthur could see the weariness etched on James's face, the toll that life had taken on him. As they sat together in a small cafe, Arthur felt a rush of excitement mixed with nerves. James, I've been thinking. I want to help you start a small business, he said, his voice steady yet filled with warmth. James looked up, surprised. "Arthur, that's very generous of you, but I don't want to impose. I've managed so far." "You've worked hard your whole life," Arthur insisted. "You deserve a chance to thrive, not just survive. Let's create something together. I've come into some resources that could help." James's eyes widened in disbelief. "Are you sure about this? It's a big step." "I am sure," Arthur replied, his heart swelling with purpose. "We can make this work. I believe in you, James. You've always been there for me, and now it's time for me to give back." As they discussed the plans for James's business, Arthur felt a sense of joy bubbling up inside him. This was what he was meant to do, helping others, creating connections, and fostering a sense of community. It was a far cry from the bitterness of vengeance, and it filled him with a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. That evening, as Arthur returned home, he reflected on the choices he had made. He knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to embrace it with open arms. He had a newfound sense of purpose, a clear path that would honor his father's legacy and allow him to rise above the pain of the past. "Thank you, Dad," he whispered into the quiet of his apartment, his heart swelling with gratitude. "I'll make you proud." William Thorne stood alone in his grand living room, the ostentatious decor doing little to shield him from the gnawing sense of discomfort that had settled in his chest. The evening's celebration had been a triumph of sorts, yet it felt hollow. The laughter and clinking of champagne glasses echoed in his mind like a haunting melody, a stark reminder of the moment he had chosen to humiliate Arthur Blackwood, his long-serving driver. He glanced around the spacious room, adorned with lavish furnishings and extravagant art pieces. The walls were draped in expensive silks, and the crystal chandelier flickered with the glow of 1,000 lights. Yet, despite the luxurious surroundings, a bitter taste lingered in his mouth. William felt a weight of regret pressing down on him, an oppressive realization that his wealth and status had come at a significant cost to his humanity. Sinking into a plush armchair, William picked up a glass of whiskey, swirling the amber liquid as he stared into its depths. The warmth of the alcohol did little to thaw the chill in his heart. He took a sip, letting the liquid burn down his throat, hoping it might ignite some semblance of warmth within him. But all he could see was Arthur's face, the shock and hurt etched into the weathered lines of the older man's skin. "Why did I do that?" he muttered to himself, the question hanging in the air like a dense fog. The memories of his past began to seep into his consciousness, moments of laughter, joy, and innocence. He reached for a nearby photo album, its leather cover creased and worn, and flipped it open. The pages were filled with images of a younger William, carefree and wide-eyed, surrounded by family and friends. There were snapshots of summer days spent at the beach, birthday parties overflowing with balloons, and quiet moments shared with his parents. As he turned the pages, his heart sank. He recalled how his relentless pursuit of success had cost him those simple pleasures. "I was so driven," he whispered, tracing a finger over a photo of his mother, her smile radiant. But was it worth it? He closed his eyes, allowing the memories to wash over him. There was a time when he had cherished the small things, the warmth of a hug, the laughter of children, the simple act of sharing a meal with loved ones. But as the years passed and ambition consumed him, those moments faded into the background, replaced by endless meetings, business deals, and the pursuit of more wealth. "Look where it's got me," he sighed, taking another sip of his whiskey, as if the alcohol could drown out the guilt. The emptiness in his chest throbbed painfully, a constant reminder of the solitude that surrounded him. Meanwhile, Arthur Blackwood sat in his modest apartment, the flickering light of a single lamp illuminating the room. He had spent years working for the Thorne family, dedicating his life to their service. His heart still ached from the public humiliation he had endured at the hands of William. It was a moment that seemed to encapsulate everything he had sacrificed for the family he had come to love. As he sat in silence, the weight of the testamento loomed over him, a bittersweet burden. The lawyer's words echoed in his mind, "Your father's legacy can be used to seek vengeance." Arthur shook his head, trying to dispel the thoughts that circled like vultures. Vengeance was not the answer. "Is it really worth it?" he murmured, staring at the wall that held a few framed photographs of his children. Memories of their laughter filled the room, but even they could not quiet the storm brewing inside him. He thought of the values his father had instilled in him: dignity, integrity, and the importance of hard work. Arthur had always believed that true wealth came from within, not from the size of one's bank account. "To stoop to revenge would only tarnish my father's name," he whispered, clenching his fists in frustration. With a sigh, he stood and moved to the window, looking out at the city that never slept. The lights twinkled like stars, distant and unattainable. As he watched the world go by, he felt a sense of kinship with those who struggled, those who fought for a chance at a better life. Just then, the doorbell chimed, breaking the reverie that had enveloped him. Arthur opened the door to find Maria, the bubbly receptionist from the Thorn Company, standing there with a bright smile. "Arthur," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with warmth. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop by. How are you holding up?" Arthur forced a smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm managing, Maria. Just thinking about the future, I suppose." She stepped inside, her presence lighting up the small room. "You know, I've always admired your strength, Arthur. You've dedicated your life to the Thorn family, and it's clear how much you care for them." "Thank you, Maria. It hasn't always been easy," he replied, gesturing for her to take a seat. "But I can't help but feel conflicted right now." Maria settled into the chair, her expression shifting to one of concern. "What's troubling you?" Arthur hesitated before spilling his heart. "I received news about my father's testamento. It's a significant amount of money, but there's a condition attached to it, using it for revenge against William for the humiliation I faced." Maria's eyes widened, and she leaned forward, her voice low. "That's a heavy burden to carry. What are you thinking?" "I don't want to be consumed by vengeance," Arthur admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But part of me feels justified in wanting to make him pay for what he did." Maria placed a gentle hand on his arm, grounding him. "Arthur, you are so much more than that moment. You have always been a man of integrity. Revenge might feel satisfying in the short term, but will it bring you peace?" He sighed deeply, the weight of her words resonating within him. "You're right. My father taught me to rise above such things, to find strength in kindness." "Exactly," she encouraged, her eyes sparkling with sincerity. "Use that legacy to help others, to build something meaningful. You can create a change that reflects who you truly are." Arthur felt a flicker of hope igniting within him. "You think I could do that?" "Absolutely," Maria beamed. "You've got a heart of gold, Arthur. Just think about what you want to accomplish for yourself and those around you." The warmth of her words wrapped around him like a comforting blanket. He realized that perhaps his true calling lay not in vengeance, but in forging a new path that honored the values his father had instilled in him. As Maria chatted animatedly about her day, Arthur found himself listening, laughing, and feeling a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in a long time. Her presence reminded him that there was still joy to be found in life, that even in the face of adversity, he could choose to uplift others rather than sink into bitterness. "Thank you, Maria," he said earnestly, a genuine smile breaking through the clouds of his doubt. "You've given me a lot to think about." "Anytime, Arthur. Just remember, you're not alone in this. You have people who care about you," she assured him, her gaze softening. As she left, Arthur stood by the door, feeling a renewed sense of determination. He was ready to embrace his future, whatever it may hold. No longer would he allow the pain of humiliation to dictate his actions. It was time to reclaim his narrative and forge a new legacy, one built on compassion and kindness. With a deep breath, Arthur turned back to the window, looking out at the sprawling city below. The lights seemed to shimmer with possibility, and he knew that his journey was only just beginning. Arthur Blackwood sat quietly on a weathered bench in the small park adjacent to the Thorn estate. The air was crisp, and the leaves danced in shades of amber and gold, painting a picturesque autumn scene. It was a stark contrast to the chaos of the recent retirement party, where he had been publicly humiliated by William Thorne. The memory of that moment stung like a fresh wound, but as he gazed at the vibrant colors of the trees, he felt a flicker of hope burgeoning within him. His thoughts drifted back to the day he had received the news about his father's will. The unexpected message from the lawyer had ignited a flame of possibilities, but now, sitting in the park, he found himself grappling with the weight of that legacy. It wasn't just about the money, it was about what he would do with it. The condition that the inheritance could only be used for revenge weighed heavily on his conscience. Deep in thought, Arthur was startled when a familiar voice interrupted his reverie. "Mind if I join you?" It was James, the gardener, a man whose hands were rough from years of labor but whose heart was gentle. "Of course, James," Arthur replied, gesturing to the empty space beside him. As James settled in, Arthur could see the lines of worry etched on his face. It was clear that life had not been kind to him either. "How have you been?" James sighed deeply, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Oh, you know. Just trying to keep my head above water. The bills keep piling up, and the garden. Well, it's a lot of work for one man." Arthur nodded, understanding the unspoken struggles that lay behind James's words. "I can't help but think about how much we all sacrifice for our jobs. Sometimes, I wonder if it's worth it." James glanced sideways at Arthur, noticing the pensive expression on his face. "What's weighing on you, Arthur? You look like you've seen a ghost." With a resigned smile, Arthur decided to open up. "I received a message from my father's lawyer. There's money involved, but it comes with strings attached. I'm trying to figure out how to navigate all of it." James raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Money can be a tricky thing. What are the strings?" Arthur hesitated, knowing that sharing the details of the will would expose a raw part of his heart. "The money can only be used for revenge on someone who humiliated me. I have to decide whether to follow through with that or to find a better way to use it." James leaned forward, his expression serious. "Revenge rarely brings happiness, Arthur. It's a poison that seeps into your soul. I've seen it happen to people I've worked for. They think vengeance will fill the void, but it only deepens it." Arthur considered James's words thoughtfully. "I know that. But after what happened at the party, part of me feels like I would be justified in taking that route. I was humiliated in front of everyone. It's hard to swallow." James placed a reassuring hand on Arthur's shoulder. "You're a good man. You've done so much for the Thorne family over the years, especially for their children. Focus on what you can do with that money to uplift yourself and others, rather than tear someone down." Arthur took a deep breath, feeling the weight of James's perspective settle within him. "You're right. I've spent so many years taking care of others, and maybe it's time I focus on my own future. But how do I even begin to do that?" James looked around the park, then returned his gaze to Arthur. "Why not start small? You've always talked about wanting to help people in your community. What if you used some of that money to support a local business or fund a project that could make a difference?" The idea sparked something within Arthur. "You mean like helping someone start their own business? That could be a way to create opportunities rather than destroy lives." "Exactly," James encouraged, nodding enthusiastically. "You have the chance to be a beacon of hope for those who need it. You could help someone who's been struggling just like us." Arthur felt a warmth spread through him at the thought. "I could help you with your gardening business, James. You've always had such a talent for it. Maybe we could collaborate and create something beautiful together." James's eyes lit up. "You really think so?" "I've always dreamed of starting my own landscaping company, but I've never had the funds to do it. It would mean a lot to me." "Let's do it," Arthur said, the excitement in his voice growing. "We can create a plan, and I can invest in your business. I want to see you succeed." James grinned, a genuine smile breaking through the clouds of worry that had shrouded his face. "You have no idea how much this means to me, Arthur. I've always respected you, not just for the work you did for the Thorns, but for who you are as a person. I've watched you with their children, and you have a gift." Arthur felt a swell of pride at James's words. "Thank you. I've always believed that our worth isn't measured by our wealth but by how we treat others. I think my father would want me to use this money for good, and you're right, revenge isn't the answer." As they spoke, the park seemed to come alive around them. Children laughed and played on the swings, couples strolled hand in hand, and the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting golden rays across the landscape. Arthur felt a sense of peace wash over him, realizing that he had the power to change not just his own life, but the lives of those around him. "Let's meet tomorrow and start brainstorming ideas," Arthur suggested. "We can draw up a plan together and figure out what you need to get your business off the ground." James nodded eagerly. "I'd love that. I have some ideas I've been jotting down. We can make it happen, Arthur. I just know it." As they parted ways, Arthur walked home with a newfound sense of purpose. The dark clouds of revenge that had loomed over him were beginning to dissipate, replaced by a bright horizon of hope and opportunity. He felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Upon entering his modest apartment, Arthur took a moment to reflect on the day's events. He retrieved a notebook from his desk and began to jot down his thoughts. He wrote about his father's values of hard work and dignity, about the importance of community, and about how he wanted to honor that legacy. He started to sketch out ideas for James's business, imagining a small landscaping company that could bring beauty to the neighborhood while providing jobs for others in need. He envisioned not just a business, but a community effort that could inspire others to uplift one another. As he continued to write, he felt the fire of ambition igniting within him. The path ahead was clear. He would use this unexpected legacy to help others, to build a future that was rooted in kindness, rather than bitterness. And in that moment, Arthur Blackwood made a vow to himself: he would not let humiliation define him. Instead, he would rise above it, using his life experiences to create a legacy of his own, a legacy of compassion, understanding, and hope. William Thorne sat in the dimly lit expanse of his opulent mansion, the walls adorned with modern art that seemed to reflect his status yet felt increasingly hollow. The echoes of laughter and clinking glasses from the evening celebration still resonated in his ears, but the grandeur of the party had faded into a suffocating silence. He sprawled on an expensive leather sofa, staring vacantly at the flickering flames of the fireplace. The warmth did little to ease the chill that had settled in his chest. As he turned his gaze towards the mantel, he spotted an old album tucked away, its leather-bound edges worn and frayed. Curiosity piqued, he reached for it, his fingers brushing against the surface with the reverence of a child unearthing a buried treasure. The moment he opened it, memories flooded back, faces of younger versions of himself, his siblings, and even his parents, all frozen in time. There were snapshots of birthdays, holidays, and family gatherings, each photograph a testament to moments that now felt like distant echoes of a life he had long abandoned in pursuit of wealth. "Will," he whispered to himself, the nickname from his childhood barely audible over the crackling of the fire. "What happened to you?" In one particular photograph, he caught a glimpse of a joyful boy with tousled hair, beaming next to his father, a man whose proud smile radiated warmth. William remembered those days filled with laughter, love, and the simple pleasures of life. A pang of nostalgia struck him as he recalled how his father's unwavering belief in hard work had shaped his own ambition. But as he grew older, that ambition morphed into a relentless quest for success, leaving behind the warmth of family bonds. His thoughts drifted back to Arthur Blackwood, his longtime driver, whose departure from the Thorne family had been marked by that humiliating speech at the retirement party. William had reveled in the spotlight, basking in the admiration of his guests, but now the memory of Arthur's crestfallen expression gnawed at him. He had wanted to impress, to showcase his power, but in doing so, he had crushed the dignity of a man who had devoted decades to his family. William felt a knot twist in his stomach. "What have I done?" he muttered, the question hanging heavy in the air. At that moment, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't experienced in years: guilt. William had always prided himself on being a titan of industry, a man who could command respect and fear alike. Yet, in the quiet of his own home, he faced a terrifying realization: the respect he had commanded was built on a foundation of arrogance and cruelty. He was surrounded by wealth and power, but he was utterly alone. Meanwhile, Arthur sat in his modest apartment, the walls adorned with photographs of the Thorne children he had cared for over the years, and the few mementos of his own life tucked away in corners. The retirement party had left him humiliated, but it had also ignited a spark within him. He had received the message from the lawyer just hours after the event, and now he found himself grappling with the weight of his father's legacy. The condition of that legacy weighed heavily on his conscience. "Use it to take revenge," the lawyer had said, his voice echoing in Arthur's mind. "You could ruin him, Arthur. Think of the satisfaction." But Arthur was not that man. He had spent a lifetime learning the values instilled in him by his father: integrity, compassion, and the importance of community. The thought of using his inheritance to destroy someone else felt like a betrayal of everything he had stood for. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, lost in thought. "Why is it always about revenge?" he murmured to himself. "Why can't it be about making things better?" His musings were interrupted by a light knock on the door. It was Maria, the receptionist from the Thorne family's office. She had always admired Arthur for his unwavering integrity, and today, she seemed to sense that he was struggling. "Arthur," she called softly, peeking her head through the door. "Can I come in?" "Of course, Maria," he replied, motioning her inside. She entered, her presence a comforting balm to his stirred emotions. "I heard about the party. I'm so sorry about what happened." Arthur sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "It was humiliating. I thought I'd given my all to that family, and then... Well, you saw it." Maria took a seat across from him, her gaze steady and compassionate. "William can be difficult, to say the least. But you've always been more than just a driver to them. You raised those kids, you were like a grandfather to them." "Maybe," Arthur replied, his voice tinged with sadness. "But..." Expression softened, but the remnants of hurt lingered in his eyes. "William, it was humiliating. I've spent years serving your family, and to be treated like that. It stung." "I know," William replied, his voice thick with regret. "I've been thinking about it a lot. I've realized how empty my life has become. I've chased after success at the cost of my relationships." Arthur studied him, searching for sincerity in William's eyes. "And what do you plan to do about it?" "I want to change," William said, his voice steadier now. "I want to make amends, to understand what really matters." Arthur sat in a quaint cafe on the corner of a bustling Manhattan street, his hands wrapped around a warm cup of coffee. The aroma of freshly brewed Java mixed with the scent of pastries wafting from the counter, creating an atmosphere that felt both inviting and ordinary. Yet, today was anything but ordinary. He was about to meet the man who had publicly humiliated him just days before at his retirement party, the billionaire William Thorne. The cafe was a small, unassuming place, filled with the soft murmur of conversations and the clinking of cups. Arthur gazed out the window, watching the city buzz with life, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of thoughts swirling in his mind. How was he supposed to sit across from someone who had belittled him in front of all those people? The memory of the party played in his mind like a broken record, each replay deepening the sting of William's words. Yet, here he was, willing to give this meeting a chance. William arrived a few minutes late, his tall frame cutting through the crowd. He wore an expensive suit, his hair perfectly styled, but his eyes betrayed a hint of uncertainty. Arthur noticed the way William scanned the cafe, looking slightly out of place amidst the casual ambience. When their eyes met, there was a moment of hesitation. Arthur's heart raced, unsure of how to initiate the conversation. "Arthur," William finally said, his voice a mix of formality and awkwardness as he approached the table. "Thanks for agreeing to meet." "Of course," Arthur replied, forcing a smile despite the tension lingering in the air. "I wasn't sure if you would actually come." William chuckled lightly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Neither was I, to be honest. I guess I'm just trying to make sense of everything." They settled into an uneasy silence, both men grappling with the weight of their respective emotions. Arthur took a sip of his coffee, searching for the right words. He had wanted to confront William, to express the hurt that had festered since that moment in the elegant ballroom. But now, face to face with him, it felt complicated. "So, how have you been?" William asked, his attempt at small talk falling flat. Arthur leaned back in his chair, studying the man before him. "I've been better, William. It's hard to forget a moment like that. You made it quite clear how you feel about me." William's expression shifted, a flicker of regret passing over his features. "I didn't mean to humiliate you. I got caught up in the moment. I thought it was all in good fun." "Good fun?" Arthur's voice rose slightly, the hurt bubbling to the surface. "You thought it was fun to mock someone who dedicated years of his life to your family? I was more than just a driver to you. I cared for your children, kept your house running smoothly. I deserved better than that." William lowered his gaze, the weight of Arthur's words hanging heavily between them. "You're right. I've been so focused on my image, my success, that I lost sight of what really matters. I've always been surrounded by wealth and privilege, but I never took the time to appreciate the people who helped me along the way." Arthur's heart softened slightly at the hint of vulnerability in William's admission. "It's easy to get lost in that world. I understand that more than you think. But your words that night, they hurt." "I know," William said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I'm sorry. I wish I could take it back. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how I treat people. I want to change, but it's hard to know where to start." "Change doesn't happen overnight," Arthur replied, his tone less confrontational now. "It's a process. You have to be willing to confront your own actions and the impact they have on others." William nodded, his brow furrowing in thought. "You're right. I've spent so much time building my empire that I forgot about the people who helped me get there. I've isolated myself in this bubble of privilege. It's lonely at the top, Arthur." Arthur leaned forward, intrigued by the depth of William's confession. "You think your success brings you happiness, but it seems to have left you feeling empty. I've seen that isolation in my own life working tirelessly for a family that never really acknowledged me. But I found joy in helping others, in connecting with people who truly matter." William's expression shifted, a mixture of admiration and envy. "I envy that. You've lived a life filled with purpose, while I've been chasing after something that feels increasingly meaningless." "Purpose can be found in the smallest of actions," Arthur said, feeling a sense of camaraderie forming between them. "It's about the relationships we build and the kindness we show. You have the means to make a difference, William. You could use your resources to help others, to create a legacy that matters." William looked at Arthur, the walls he had built around himself beginning to crack. "But what if I don't know how? What if I'm too far gone?" "It's never too late to change, William. We all have the capacity for growth. You just have to start somewhere," Arthur replied, feeling a flicker of hope. "Do you really believe that?" William asked, his eyes searching Arthur's face for reassurance. "I do. It starts with honesty and humility. You're already taking a step by being here today, facing the consequences of your actions. That's more than most people would do." William took a deep breath, the weight of his past choices pressing down on him. "I guess I never thought I'd find myself sitting here, talking to you like this. I've spent so long building walls, I forgot what it felt like to connect with someone. Arthur smiled gently. Sometimes, it takes a moment of humiliation to bring clarity. You've been given an opportunity to reassess your life and your values. Embrace it. Maybe you're right, William said, a hint of a smile breaking through his earlier seriousness. I've been so focused on success that I neglected the essence of living. I want to do better, Arthur. I want to be better. Arthur nodded, feeling a sense of warmth in their conversation. Then let's work on that together. Helping others can be a powerful way to heal. The ambience of the cafe faded away as their conversation unfolded, both men finding solace in the unexpected connection forming between them. The initial tension that had filled the air transformed into a shared understanding, a recognition of the struggles they both faced. As they spoke, Arthur recalled the values his father had instilled in him: integrity, kindness, and the importance of lifting others up. He felt a renewed sense of purpose in sharing those lessons with William. Imagine the impact you could have if you used your wealth and influence for good. You have the power to change lives. William's expression shifted, a spark of determination igniting in his eyes. I want to be that person. I want to leave a legacy of kindness, not just wealth. But I need your help, Arthur. I need guidance. Then let's figure it out together, Arthur replied, his heart swelling with hope. It's about taking small steps, making connections, and finding joy in the process. In that moment, as they shared their dreams and fears, two men from vastly different worlds began to forge a bond. The cafe buzzed around them. Taken a toll on me as well. But you have something I don't, William said, looking back up, intensity in his eyes. You have integrity. You have values that I lost a long time ago. I want to understand that. I want to know how you did it. Arthur met William's gaze, surprised by the earnestness in his voice. It wasn't easy. My father taught me that dignity comes from hard work, from treating everyone with respect, regardless of their status. I've always believed that money doesn't define a person's worth. William nodded slowly, absorbing Arthur's words. I can see that now. I've spent so much time chasing after things that don't matter. I thought that wealth and power would fill the void, but all it's done is create a chasm that pushes people away. Arthur took a sip of his coffee, contemplating the man across from him. And what do you plan to do about it? You can't just sit here and lament your choices. Change requires action. I know, William replied, frustration creeping into his tone. But where do I even begin? I've built this empire on the backs of others, and now I'm left wondering if I've lost my soul in the process. Start by acknowledging your mistakes, Arthur suggested, his voice firm yet compassionate. You need to confront the people you've wronged and show them that you're willing to change. William sighed, his shoulders slumping. It sounds simple, but I know it won't be easy. I've made a lot of enemies along the way. Then make amends, Arthur urged, leaning forward. Show them you're willing to learn and grow. It's never too late to change your path, William. The tension in the air began to dissipate as they spoke, the initial animosity giving way to a shared understanding. William looked at Arthur, his eyes reflecting a newfound respect. You're right. I need to take responsibility for my actions, not just for the sake of my image, but for my own peace of mind. I don't want to be that person anymore. Arthur smiled softly, his heart warming at the sight of William's sincerity. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong. But remember, real change comes from within. You have to want it, truly want it. I do, William said, determination settling over him like a cloak. I want to be better, for myself, for those around me. I want to understand what it means to truly care for others. I've lost that connection, and I want to find it again. Then don't waste this opportunity, Arthur encouraged, his voice steady. You have the chance to redefine yourself. Take it, William. You might find that the path to redemption is more fulfilling than the one you've been on. William nodded, gratitude swelling within him. Thank you, Arthur. I appreciate your honesty, even when it's hard to hear. You've shown me a perspective I desperately needed. The cafe continued to buzz around them, but in that moment, it felt as if they were in their own world, a bubble of reflection and clarity. Arthur leaned back, his own worries and burdens momentarily lifted as he saw a glimpse of hope in William's eyes. Just remember, Arthur said, his voice softening once more. Change won't happen overnight. It's a journey, not a destination. But every step you take matters. William smiled, a genuine warmth spreading across his face. I'll hold on to that. Thank you for giving me this chance to talk, Arthur. It means more than you know. As they sat there, the weight of their pasts lingering in the air, both men felt the stirrings of something new and understanding that perhaps redemption was possible, and that the legacies they carried could be shaped into something greater than their past mistakes. In that moment, amidst the coffee cups and soft chatter, two lives began to intertwine in unexpected ways, each finding the courage to confront not only their failures but also the possibility of a brighter future together. Arthur sat at his modest wooden desk, the light from the window casting a warm glow over the clutter of papers and faded photographs that told the story of his life. He had spent countless hours here, reflecting on his past and contemplating the future. Now, with the weight of his father's legacy resting heavily on his shoulders, he felt torn between a path of vengeance and one of kindness. The memories of the party still echoed in his mind, the laughter of the guests juxtaposed with the sting of humiliation he had endured at the hands of William Thorne. For a moment, he closed his eyes, allowing himself to remember his father's teachings, lessons in dignity, hard work, and the importance of compassion. Never let anger dictate your actions, Arthur, his father used to say. True strength lies in choosing kindness, especially when it's difficult. As he opened his eyes, a resolve began to form within him. The decision weighed heavily, but Arthur knew deep down that he wanted to help others, to honor his father's memory in a way that reflected the values he had instilled in him. He picked up the phone, dialing James, the gardener who had become a friend during his years with the Thorne family. James, it's Arthur, he said when his friend answered. I've been thinking about what we talked about the other day, the struggles you've been facing with the garden and your dream of starting that landscaping business. Arthur, it's good to hear from you. I didn't think you'd want to talk about that after everything. James's voice trailed off, uncertainty hanging in the air. Let's meet. I have something I want to discuss, and I think it could change things for both of us. The cafe was quiet when they met, the hum of conversation providing a soothing backdrop as Arthur and James settled into a corner booth. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, mingling with the sweet scent of pastries. Arthur could see the weariness etched on James's face, a reflection of the struggles he faced daily. Arthur, you look well, James said, a hint of a smile breaking through his fatigue. What's on your mind? I've been given an unexpected inheritance, Arthur began, carefully choosing his words. And I want to use part of it to help you start your business. I know how hard you've worked, and I believe you deserve a chance to succeed. James's eyes widened, disbelief washing over his features. You're serious? You'd do that for me? Of course, Arthur replied, his heart swelling with a sense of purpose. I've realized that true wealth isn't just about money, it's about lifting each other up and making a difference in our community. Arthur, I can't thank you enough. This means more than you know. James leaned forward, his voice thick with emotion. But what about you? What are you going to do? Arthur paused, looking out the window at the bustling street beyond, people rushing about their lives, each with their own stories. I want to take the time to figure that out. I don't want to rush into anything just because I have this money. I want to understand what it means to truly live, to find joy in the little things. Living well isn't about the money, that's for sure, James agreed, a glimmer of hope lighting his eyes. You've always had a good heart, Arthur. I admire that about you. I'm trying to honor my father's legacy, Arthur said quietly. He taught me that helping others is how we find meaning in our lives. As they talked, Arthur felt a warmth grow within him, a sense of clarity that had eluded him since the fateful night of the party. He realized that this path helping James, supporting his dream was not just an act of kindness, it was an opportunity for healing, for both of them. After their conversation, Arthur walked James to his car, the weight of his decision lightening with each step. "Let's meet next week to discuss the details of your business plan," he said, clapping James on the shoulder. "I'll be here to support you every step of the way." "Thank you, Arthur. You're not just helping me, you're showing me that there's still hope in this world," James replied, his voice filled with gratitude. As Arthur returned home, he found himself reflecting on the choices he could make with his inheritance. He envisioned a community garden where people could gather, share stories, and find solace in nature. He could see himself working alongside James, planting seeds of hope and kindness in the hearts of those around them. Meanwhile, across town, William sat alone in his opulent mansion, the silence deafening. The lavish decor that once brought him pride now felt like a heavy burden, a constant reminder of the emptiness that surrounded him. He flipped through the pages of an old photo album, images of a younger version of himself smiling alongside friends and family. Those moments felt like a lifetime ago, overshadowed by his relentless pursuit of success. Was it worth it? He muttered to himself, the question hanging in the air. The laughter that used to echo through these halls had faded, leaving only the echo of his own voice. He thought of Arthur, the man he had belittled, and felt a pang of guilt twist in his gut. What have I done? As he brooded over his choices, William couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something vital in his life. He had everything: wealth, status, power, but lacked the very thing that made life worth living: connection. The realization hit him like a thunderbolt, forcing him to confront the emptiness that had consumed him for years. He picked up his phone, hesitating as he contemplated reaching out to Arthur. The thought of facing the man he had humiliated filled him with dread, but deep down, he knew he needed to make amends. Can I really change? He asked himself, the question lingering in his mind. With a deep breath, William dialed Arthur's number, his heart racing. It rang once, twice, and then went to voicemail. "Arthur, it's William Thorne," he said, his voice shaky. I'd like to talk. Please call me back." He hung up, uncertainty gnawing at him. But as he paced the room, he felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this was the beginning of something new, an opportunity for redemption. If Arthur could choose kindness over revenge, maybe he could learn to embrace humility and forge a different path for himself. As the sun began to set, casting vibrant colors across the sky, Arthur felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that he was on the right track, that helping James was just the first step in a larger journey of self-discovery. He was determined to help others, to create a ripple effect of kindness in a world that often felt so cold. In that moment, both men stood at a crossroads, unaware of how their lives were intertwined. They were taking their first steps toward transformation, one fueled by compassion and the other by the desire for redemption. Each would soon realize that true wealth lay not in money or power, but in the connections they forged and the lives they touched along the way. The paths they chose would lead them to a deeper understanding of themselves and each other, setting the stage for a profound change that neither could have anticipated. As the late afternoon sun streamed through the window of Arthur Blackwood's modest apartment, casting warm hues across the room, he sat at his small dining table, a letter in hand. The envelope bore the insignia of a prestigious law firm, and his heart raced with a mix of anticipation and trepidation. He had spent days pondering the implications of his father's will, a document that seemed to carry the weight of expectations and burdens. With a deep breath, he tore open the envelope, his fingers trembling slightly. The letter unfolded, revealing lines of legal jargon that quickly blurred into a swirl of words. But as he read further, clarity emerged, and his eyes widened in disbelief. "Mr. Blackwood," it began, "I am writing to inform you that the inheritance from your late father is substantially greater than you were led to believe. Furthermore, There are no conditions attached to its use beyond the stipulation that it must be employed for the benefit of those in need. Arthur blinked, rereading the passage several times. The implications of his father's intentions began to take shape in his mind. His father had not simply left him a fortune, he had left him a responsibility, a calling to make a difference. A foundation, dedicated to helping those in need, he murmured, the words tasting both sweet and bitter on his tongue. It's not about vengeance, it's about legacy. His thoughts drifted back to the conversation he had with Maria, the receptionist who had encouraged him to follow his heart. What would Dad want me to do? He whispered to himself, recalling the values of dignity and hard work that had been instilled in him since childhood. The weight of his decision felt both liberating and terrifying. Arthur, a voice interrupted his reverie. It was James, the gardener, who had become a close friend and confidant. He knocked lightly before stepping into the apartment, sensing the tension in the air. You look like you've seen a ghost. What's going on? Arthur gestured for him to take a seat across from him. James, I just received some news about my father's will. It's more significant than I ever imagined. James raised an eyebrow, leaning in with curiosity. Significant how? Arthur took a deep breath, excitement breaking through his earlier solemnity. He left me a foundation money to help others. I can use it to make real change, to do something good. A smile spread across James's face. Man, that's incredible. You've always had a big heart, Arthur. This is your chance to really make a difference. Yes, but there's more, Arthur continued, his voice growing serious. There were no conditions attached to it, except that I must use it to help those in need. I thought about using it for revenge at first, but I realize now that's not what my father would have wanted. James nodded in understanding. Revenge is a weight that'll drag you down. You're already a better man than Thorne ever was. Use this to lift others, not to bury him. Arthur smiled, feeling the warmth of camaraderie. You're right. I want to do something meaningful with this money. I want to help people like you, who are just trying to make ends meet. Speaking of which, James said with a chuckle, when are you going to help me open that little bakery we've talked about? Arthur's heart swelled with excitement at the thought. Let's make it happen. Together. As the two friends began brainstorming ideas, Arthur's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, surprised to see a message from William Thorne. It read, "Can we meet? I need to talk to you." The urgency in William's message was palpable, and for a moment, Arthur hesitated. Could he face the man who had humiliated him so publicly? But as he considered the newfound purpose in his life, he realized this meeting could be an opportunity not just for confrontation, but for understanding. I need to meet him, Arthur said resolutely, looking at James. This could be important. Just be careful. He's still a billionaire who thinks the world revolves around him, James replied, concern etched on his face. I know. But maybe I can help him see things differently, just as I'm trying to do for myself. Later that evening, Arthur found himself seated across from William in a small, dimly lit cafe. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with unspoken words. William, dressed in a tailored suit that seemed to weigh heavily on his shoulders, looked out of place in such an intimate setting. Thank you for coming, Arthur, William began, his voice low and hesitant. I know I don't deserve your time after what I did. Arthur studied him, the man who had once wielded power over him like a weapon. Why did you want to meet me? He asked, keeping his tone even. I've been thinking a lot about that night. I was a jerk, and I can't shake the feeling that I've made a terrible mistake, William admitted, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. I've lost sight of what truly matters. My life is empty. Arthur felt a flicker of empathy. You've achieved so much, yet you feel alone. Isn't that what you wanted? William sighed heavily, his gaze dropping to the table. I wanted success, but I didn't realize how far I'd have to go to get it. All those parties, the business deals. They mean nothing without people to share them with. I'm surrounded by superficiality, and it's suffocating. Arthur leaned back in his chair, surprised by the vulnerability William was showing. What do you want, then? What do you see when you look in the mirror? I want to change, William replied, his voice barely above a whisper. I want to be better. I want to connect with people, to find meaning in my life. But I don't know how. Maybe you could start by acknowledging the pain you've caused, Arthur suggested gently. It's a step toward understanding and healing. William looked up, meeting Arthur's gaze. I realize that now. I've been so focused on myself that I forgot how to be human. I've seen the way you've handled your situation with such grace. I admire that. Arthur felt a warmth in his chest at the compliment. Grace is easy when you have a purpose. I just found out that my father left me a foundation to help others. It's a chance to make a difference. A foundation? William echoed, his interest piqued. What kind of foundation? It's dedicated to helping people in need. And I want to use it to create opportunities for those who are struggling like you and me, Arthur said, determination flooding his voice. I believe that's where true wealth lies. William's expression softened, his defenses lowering. I'd like to help. I've lost sight of my values, but I want to support you in this. Maybe together we can do something worthwhile. Arthur studied him carefully, weighing his sincerity. Are you sure? I don't want this to be another empty promise. Honestly? William leaned forward, urgency in his tone. I'm tired of living in a bubble. If I can use my resources to support your vision, I'd like to. It's time I did something meaningful. Then let's work together, Arthur said, feeling a sense of hope blossom within him. Let's create something that matters. In that moment, a connection forged from shared experiences began to take shape between them. Two men from different worlds, each carrying their burdens of pride and humility, began to envision a future where their lives could intertwine for a greater purpose. As they left the cafe, Arthur felt a sense of resolve settle over him. The legacy of his father was more than just finances, it was a call to action, a chance to inspire change in others. And perhaps, just perhaps, it could lead to healing for both him and William, a redemption not just for the past, but for the future they were choosing to create together. In the days that followed, Arthur found himself energized by the possibilities ahead. He dedicated himself to the foundation his father had left him, diving into community outreach and local initiatives. Each step he took resonated with a renewed sense of purpose, and he felt the echoes of his father's teachings guiding him along the way. Meanwhile, William, too, began to confront his own demons. With Arthur's encouragement, he reached out to former friends he had lost touch with, hoping to mend the frayed connections that had once defined him. He volunteered at local shelters, rediscovering the joy that came from helping others. The emptiness that had haunted him began to fade, replaced by a sense of belonging he had long forgotten. As the two men worked side by side, their bond deepened, each learning from the other in ways neither had anticipated. Through their efforts, they not only began to change the lives of those around them but also their own, forging a new legacy built on compassion, understanding, and the true richness of the human experience. And in the end, as they stood together at the opening of a community center funded by the foundation, Arthur realized that the real legacy was not merely in money or property, but in the lives they touched and the love they shared. It was a legacy that transcended their past grievances, intertwining their futures in a tapestry of hope and redemption.